Hello everybody and welcome to another hobby cheating video, and this week the time has finally come to deal with my Skaven bases. That's right, today we're going to talk all about painting some bases. Let's get into it.
The strict technomancer that is Vincey V. Let us get to the technique and learn it, Vincey V.
So I've been wishy-washy for quite a while on my Skaven bases. I've just been working the army and assuming the basing would work it out. Unfortunately, I had a tournament to go to, and you'll probably see a video on that in the future. And as such, well, my models had to have bases. Fortunately, this is a team tournament, so I had a partner, Tom, who just decided he wanted to do some sewer bases, and I said, you know what, let's do it. He found a cool 3D print file, and so I got a bunch of them 3D printed out, and today we're going to paint them. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. He made the decision, so I don't have to. I call it a win. Let's head over to the desk, and hey, we'll show you how we'll paint them. So the first step when I'm painting these bases is to get them onto my paint sticks. So these are just simple paint sticks. You can get them from like Home Depot, which where I got them, or anywhere where they do to sample paints or whatever, like wall paints. And I unroll a big strip of double-sided tape on there, and then pop, 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 stick them all right along. Easy, breezy, beautiful. Makes it so easy to, as you'll see throughout this video, to paint a ton of bases in mass. And this is actually why I like keeping them separate from the figures. It just makes my life a heck of a lot easier. Alright, so once they're painted, I prime them up. For that, we use our Monument rattle can, that's right. This is their matte black primer. Great primer. For when I'm doing like larger projects that need a rattle can. So prime them black, give them a little dusting of zenithal, the same brand, of white from above, and there we go. Now you can see this is what they came out as. Basically, little simple zenithal. Most of these are flat, so it's just about having some bright white from above. Okay, with them ready to go, we're finally ready to get painting. Or are we? If you remember a long time ago, very early in this channel, I did a whole thing about preparing for your best paint job. One of the issues with these 3D prints is that the recesses on them, not quite as deep with in between the bricks as I'd like, and it got a little blown away by the white spray paint. So I begin by actually going through and taking some thin Nuln Oil and just hitting every base to basically reinstantiate those recesses. Now, we'll touch them again later, but for now, this gives me a better start. So with that final bit of prep out of the way, now we're ready to begin painting them. Okay, so I start by mixing up a little bit of turquoise and Payne's Gray ink. Why ink? Because it's translucent, it's going to show more of the undershade, and I want a lot of that to come through. I load that up into my airbrush, and I go to work. Pretty straightforward, I just spray all of the bases. Now, normally when I airbrush on my desk, because I'm recording a video, I put a piece of cardboard under it so I don't spray onto my painting mat or my keyboard. I forgot to do that this time, so that's fun. But anyways, I turn them all that color, not a big deal. Once they're there, my next goal is to start bringing back in some light. I'm going to use a lot of stippling and very simple techniques throughout this to create more visual interest and noise within the stone to make it look like more credible, realistic, and natural stone. So, my next step is I go in and I take some cobalt teal from Golden So Flat. These are great paints. I really like to use them because they're like very dead matte. They're great for sort of rock and stuff like that. And I go ahead and just take a big brush, get it out, get some paint onto the tip of the brush, wipe it off just like as though I was going to dry brush, but then instead of dry brushing it, which is going to create inappropriate texture, I'm going to stipple. So you see how I just stab it. I'm just like, think again, just like you're stabbing with a knife, right? Just down, 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 pop, 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 pop. And that creates this nice, dotty, uneven, scratchy, very credibly looking rock texture without me having to go in and do this by hand, which would take for freaking ever. And frankly, more time than I want to spend on bases, even in an army I really care about. So, I just stipple out all of the bases. Takes a little while, but that's okay. Keep going back to the paint, keep refreshing, and we're good to go. One note here, you'll see that the towel that I'm wiping my paint on is like an auto towel. So like it's the blue auto, I don't know what they're called, like wipes, like the same thing you'd use for your windshield, if you're cleaning your windshield at the gas station. I just find these to be a lot better than regular paper towels for this kind of purpose because they don't shed any fibers. They're a little more water resistant, so like they don't absorb in the same way, so you keep more liquid in the brush. Anyways, Little tip there, picking up a pack of those or a roll of those, generally a good idea. Again, you can get those from the hardware store. Okay, so once that's there, I'm good to go. Next up, I've got to once again bring back, I'm not quite happy with the depth of recess yet. We got to darken this down. So what are we going to do? We're going to mix up a little oil wash. So I mix up an oil wash of a mix of ivory black and some blue here, just a little bit of blue. And keep it nice and thin. And then I'm just going to wash all of the bases. So just give them a quick oil wash. I let this sit for probably 30, 40, 45 minutes. Then I come back in again with that blue, wipes, auto wipes, and I go ahead and just wipe them all down. You can see I don't pick up a ton of material from this, but there's still some. And it just helps clean up any of the staining or stuff like that. I do have just a touch of white spirits on the towel as I'm wiping to make sure I'm just cleaning those top areas. I gave it enough time to let the wash become sort of touch dry, so I'm not picking it up out of the recesses. All of the normal medium that's there, the sort of white spirits that are in the paint itself, in the wash, has evaporated. Okay, with that done, guess what? It's back to stippling again. So, because we've got to keep reinforcing this. That's actually sort of the trick here. We continually back and forth reinforce this process to create layer upon layer of texture that creates that credible looking rock. But all these techniques are very simple. That's what I love about this. So, yet again, same cobalt teal, same basic plan, bing, 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 good to go. Stipple over all the bases, and we're rock and roll. That more or less is going to finish up the rock for us. If you want to, well, you're going to see how we come back to it later, but it's going to finish up the rock. You'll get it. All right, now it's time to address these vents. You'll notice on a lot of these sewer bases I have like liquid or sewer vents or grates or stuff like that. So I take a little bit of a strong white paint, just sort of a dead white, and I touch it into all of the recesses, the grates, cover the water, any kind of spillage, anything like that. That's to match the larger display board wherein I'm going to end up using the same colors. But also because this is going to end up being a fluorescent color, and so we have to undershade it with something white to really get the brightness out of it. One of the best tips I can ever give you is if you want to use any kind of super bright fluorescence, to undershade it first in some kind of really intense white. And I actually do hit a couple, especially in some areas, I do actually hit this twice over all the bases. Once that's set and dry, I then come in with a mix of golden high flow fluorescent green and a little bit of yellow. And I just cover all of the white. I mean, it's pretty much straight simple. Just with a big brush, dabbing it in there, getting it all covered. Nothing too complicated. And you'll see it's bright, it's vibrant, and what's neat is it will fluoresce in black light. So that's pretty cool. So at any rate, that just gives me that nice base tone. I do want to show that some of this is kind of spilling out. So I load up the same mix but thinned down into my airbrush. And then I very lightly in all the areas kind of around the grates or the water or stuff like that, I give it just a quick gentle spray to create just a little bit of extra light spilling out over the sides and so on. Not completely realistic, but it has a cool look and it helps break up some of that stone. Our major goal here from this point on will be to break up that blue stone and add more visual interest, because anytime you have a lot of the similar colored thing, even if it's heavily textured, it's boring. We don't want boring. We don't want the bases to be super exciting or crazy because they're meant to be bases. The fig itself should be the main show, but we do want there to be some visual interest. All right, so with that out of the way, it's now time to turn to the metals. And this is where you're going to actually get the effect of the grates where it looks better. So I mix up some Vallejo metal color steel along with just a little bit of black to darken it a little bit. And then I just start base coating all of the metals. This is actually one of the longest steps of the entire process, because the metal is small and finicky and I don't want to get metal paint anywhere else. So I just slowly work my way around every metal paint and grate and everything and trace it all. This took about an hour and a half probably just doing these stupid little grates to hit all these bases. But there you go. Once they're in there, they're in there. And we're good to go. Now the rest of the steps of the metal are much faster, thankfully. So what we're going to do then is I take a little bit of silver, I put it on a brush, wipe most of it off, and then I'm just, again, same blue wipe, and then I'm just going to lightly scratch at some of these metals. Just dings and scratches and tings and, kind of wiping it over to create little cuts and scratches and areas of brightness and small changes and highlights. I'm not looking to do anything amazing here. I'm looking to, again, create noise, right? Just visual noise, where there's these light catches and visual interest in things that I can play with later. Some of these will end up getting covered up, and that's fine. So if I make a mistake, if I put it on too heavy, don't worry, our later weathering steps can hide those sins. With that little highlight done, we go into the weathering phase on the steel. This is actually a huge amount of the rest of the work. So this is kind of a sequence thing. I start with some dirty down rust. Don't forget, down in the comments below, you can find affiliate links for everything I'm using here, as well as dirty down, and actually save some money on it. I love dirty down rust in this case, so I heat up the bottle, shake it like crazy on my vortex mixer, and then go to work. So I just start by dabbing it, splashing it, moving it around on all the metals all over the thing. Just creating some fun random patterns where I think it's going to create visual interest. But I am focusing on places where water and liquid and things like that would naturally gather. So edges, rivets, corners, all of that kind of thing. That's where we want to focus in. And that's where I'll focus for the rest of the time. Once that's done, I get out some Seraphim Sepia and just kind of spread it over all of that rust. And so that will partially loosen some of that up, the dirty down, because it can reactivate it with later layers. This will also help seal in the dirty down so my other work doesn't reactivate it. And it will also help tint some of that other metal brown to show that the rust just doesn't go from regular metal to pure rust instantaneously. That's not realistic. There's progression of rust. And so what we do is we kind of just sepia all around and we're good to go. Next up, I'm going to get out a couple of fun tools. These are sort of a paste. These are from Green Stuff World. And I move through a couple different tones here of kind of a red rust and an orange rust and neutral and so on. And I just start dabbing these all over, again, focusing on things like rivets, edges, stuff like that, building this up. And what's cool about these is I work sometimes inside the other areas, sometimes not. But mostly I focus, again, on edges, rivets, corners, things like that, where there would be really intense rust buildup. And these are fun because they have texture in them, so they will actually change the way that you perceive it because they have this big physical texture, which is cool in this case because it makes it look old and really beaten as though the metal is pitted and given away. So I just work my way up through all those, and that gives me a good enough place to continue. Now, we're almost there. My last step is to get out some Vallejo rust. I just love this color orange. You can also just use a fluorescent orange if you want. It'll work the same. And now I go in and in very small areas, just the tops of rivets, little touches and dip dabs along edges, things like that. I hit it with that pure orange. And what's cool is since the base stone is mostly in blue for these underground sewers, the orange being a complementary color in very limited amounts acts as this powerful contrast to it. And it really creates a lot of visual interest, as you'll see. Once this rust is on there, look at how much transformed these bases appear. They look so much more visually interesting. So now we have this triadic scheme of the yellow-green, the deep blue, and the bright orange, with that powerful complementary mix in there. So, with that orange rust in there, we've got that weathering on the metal done, and it's ready to go. But there's one more step. We still have too much neutral blue area. Just kind of boring. It's just like, it's yes, it has texture. Yes, it's going on. I didn't want it to be bright or crazy. But it's still not enough. Right? It still looks, frankly, kind of samey and boring. So, we're going to get out some pigment here. And this is just like a red oxide pigment. And I start dabbing it in. Where am I focusing on? I'm focusing on areas where there are big cracks in the stone. Forcing that pigment down in there so that way it's in the recesses, down in there, and looks like there's this interesting other dust and sort of oxide that has built up. I also focus around the edges of things like pipes and other metal components. So anytime I can push it into an edge, a crevice, a recess, or up against existing metal, that's how I focus the pigment. It just helps make it a lot more visually compelling, breaks up the blue, and really makes it look a lot cooler. So once all those steps are done, here's how the bases look without any figures on them. Now I haven't blacked out the edges yet, and of course that's going to be a big deal. So I go ahead next up and actually take all the figs and attach them to all the bases. Some of these are just base toppers, so I have to actually put them on a base itself. And that leads to truly the most rewarding part of my day, black rimming the base. Oh, God, at the end of this project, let me tell you what, this was a rewarding moment. So just give a nice, I use intense black from AK 3rd Gen here, to just give a nice, intense black all around that edge. Create that wonderful picture frame, that separation in the universe. And here's a little of what they look like all built up, sitting out on there. I also took some nicer pictures. Here you go. Although, like, it's hard for me to fit them all in front of my backdrop, so that's why I kind of gave you 2 shots here. But here's how they look, kind of very tightly packed in to try to huddle up into my back in front of my backdrop. I think these sewer bases came out really fun. They were intense. There's a lot of steps, but the cool part is there's nothing actually complicated about any of the painting techniques. They're all very simple, straightforward things, okay? You can do any of these things I did here. It was mostly just stabbing and dabbing and stippling, and with, you know, bunch of synthetic and dry brushes and stuff like that. So all completely doable. This is no skill, but I think looks pretty good. Okay, so if you enjoyed this, hey, give it a like. Subscribe for additional hobby cheating. We have new videos here every Saturday. Who knows how much longer this Skaven series will continue? I assume forever. Because there'll always be more rats to paint. But I really appreciate when you hit like and subscribe. It helps other people find the channel and shows me that you appreciate what I do, which is cool. If you really appreciate what I do, there's other ways to support the channel. You can look down in the comments below, and hey, what's there? It's all those affiliate links I mentioned earlier. You can pick up stuff like the Dirty Down and all the products you saw me use here. Doesn't cost you anything extra. In fact, it usually saves you money, and it really does help the channel. There's also, of course, the games that Uncle Adam and I make if you're looking for a new skirmish obsession. And there's also our Patreon, focused on review and feedback and taking your next step on your hobby journey. As always, though, I thank you so much for watching this one, and we'll see you next time.